Hi, have you been wondering how to use modern tech to boost your business profits? Or you're passionate about tech and eager to dive into opportunities like remote work or professional networking? You're in the right place. Welcome to Digza Podcast. My name is Samuel Achatu Bashir, the founder and CEO of Digza and a seasoned senior software engineer. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. On this episode of our podcast, we'll be having a special guest. His name is Omar, a senior software engineer at Microsoft. On this episode, Omar will be sharing some of his experiences working at Microsoft, what it feels like to work for a giant company. We'll also be talking about his startup named Kandor, how the startup has been impacting life, helping engineers who are upcoming, mentoring them on how to prepare for interviews to work for top companies like Google and Microsoft. I believe you learn a lot from Omar, so stay tuned. If you have thoughts, questions, drop it on the comment section. And if you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up. Hi, welcome to our podcast, Omar. Really glad to have you on board as our guest. Uh, so to get started, we'd like to have you introduce yourself a bit, and then we could take it up from there.
For sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Omar Abu specifically. I was born in Jos, Nigeria. I'm originally from Kogi State, Nigeria. Went to school, moved to the US in 2014, went to school at Iowa State University, graduated, and then currently working at Microsoft as a software engineer too, tech lead specifically. That's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, interesting. I would like to know, can you kind of share your journey, your software engineering journey, how you started and like how you got to be part of the Microsoft team? Like what were some of the uh critical moments that, transformed your life and your career?
Mm-hmm. So I originally started off studying aerospace engineering at Iowa State University, and around 3 years in, 2.5, 3 years in, I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do in the long run, mainly because I had been fascinated with planes, and after I took like aerodynamic classes and I figured out how planes worked, it wasn't as exciting for me anymore. And so I looked to pivot to a major, something where I wouldn't get bored, something like a career field that constantly kept evolving, because that's the kind of person I am. I have that what's next mentality. All right, I figured this thing out. How can I build on top of it? How can I make it better? And with aerospace, the opportunities there were very narrowed. But I looked for something where the opportunities would be broad, and that's how I ended up in software engineering. So I switched majors. I took a class I switched majors in the middle of the semester, and it was too late to pick up any software engineering classes. So I ended up going online to LinkedIn Learning at the time. Well, it's LinkedIn Learning right now. At that time, it was lynda.com. And I learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript by myself. And I started working on little projects, like little portfolios. I remember the first thing I built was like a web calculator, and I ended up using that as a portfolio project that I used to apply to get a job in the summer on campus at that time. And without taking one software class, I was able to get a job, and I think that was the biggest pivotal moment for me, where it was like everything, like I control my own destiny. I control the work that I put in, and I'm directly seeing the output of that work, right? So if I didn't take that class, if I didn't take that LinkedIn Learning class to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? I could have as well just said, well, it's too late to pick up any class, so I'm just going to coast till the rest. But I took that initiative, and the outcome of that initiative was getting a job without taking any software engineering classes, right? From school at least. And so I think that was a huge pivotal moment for me. And then since then, it's just been sourcing opportunities, grasping opportunities as they come, or trying to go find them, and stepping out of my comfort zone, learning new things, putting myself in places where it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I feel uncomfortable, but that's where I should be. And it's just been doing that over and over again until I landed a role at Microsoft. And you asked about the role at Microsoft. It was prior, while on campus, as well doing software engineering on campus, at university, Microsoft and a bunch of other companies send recruiters to try to recruit students, and they wouldn't come to career fairs because the timing was off for them. So they would just say, "Hey, we're coming to campus to interview. Or submit your resume, and if we like you, we'll give you like a 15-minute time slot, essentially, to not prove yourself per se, but just have a conversation with you to see if you're a good fit." And from the semester I switched till when I graduated, they came maybe like once a year every time, and I kept failing the interviews. I kept failing and failing and failing and failing and failing. And not in my defense, I personally, I wasn't in the right headspace for it. I wasn't preparing for it. I would just show up and then think I could just pass based like just vibes, I would just go and like whatever would happen. And so it wasn't until my senior year that I was like, all right, let me try to prepare for this thing. Let me try to actually read the whole email that comes with, all right, this is how you prepare, and I prepared. And yeah, eventually everything went well. I think there are a few specific things that they saw in me that I wasn't even trying to show them. It was just part of myself. And we can go into all of that later. But yeah, I think eventually my whole growth and journey to Microsoft has just been me putting comfortable situations, because that's where I've achieved the most growth, essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting experience you had, from learning how to code to joining Microsoft. I mean, what is it like working for a giant company like Microsoft? And how does some of the day-to-day challenges or work you're doing support your growth as a software engineer?
That's a good question. So there's always that aspect of feeling like you're a code monkey when you're working at a giant company, because the business value and business use and the justifications for why things are done come from top. They come from like the top. All right, we're going to move towards this direction. Sometimes they have meetings for you to try to understand it. Other times, they really don't care. Like the decision has been made and you just go do stuff. So I thought it was going to be like that. And when you first join, it feels like it's like that because you don't understand, you may not necessarily understand the business. You may understand the programming, you may understand the coding, but you may not understand the business, which is completely fine. And initially it felt like that, but then as time went on and as you attended more meetings, more town halls, then underneath town halls is like your whole organization, the whole org is meeting to basically just discuss. Then from there you start attending, your EVP's town halls, then your CVP town halls. So like lower in the chain, that's closer to you. Then you start to understand, okay, this is where the organization is heading towards, right? This is the business use case. This is why I'm doing this. Then from there, you start to understand the business value and potentially start giving your own feedback as to say, okay, I understand why we're doing this. Maybe can it be done this way, or this is another way of basically doing it. So that's basically how it feels on a day-to-day level. If you're new, it feels like you're a code monkey, but eventually if you embed yourself enough into the company and into the culture and actually listen during the meetings and attend those large crowd meetings where they're trying to explain things, if it's a good organization, then you kind of understand, okay, this is why specific things are basically getting done. The second part to your question was, how does the culture support my professional growth?
Yeah.
So Microsoft in general is a very unique company in the sense of how employees are evaluated. So you're evaluated based on 3 criteria. Your impact, right? So the impact that your work has, the impact you make to other people, so how I help other people, and how you leverage other people to make impact. So those 3 buckets. So the work I did, how did I help someone else, and how did I leverage other people to do my work? And with those 3 circles, and if any of those circles is lacking, then you may not be as basically, what's the word I'm looking for? You won't be as full. Someone who has a little bit of all 3 is technically better than someone who has just big impact and they didn't help other people and they didn't leverage other people to do their work. So with that, it kind of breeds a culture of, hey, everyone, if you reach out to someone saying, hey, I have this idea for this project and I need your help, they're more likely to lean in and help you, right? You also go source out opportunities for you to make an impact, for you to help other people to make an impact, right? If an org comes in and says, hey, we need data for X, Y, and Z, you're more likely to help because of that culture, right? It's the culture of let me help you, you help me, and that way you don't have people stepping over other people's necks to say, oh, you know, I did this. It's less about I and it's more about we. So that was, I think, starting my career there definitely opened my eyes to seeing how far you can go if you go as a team, if you go as a collective, essentially. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned so far in my professional growth. That's non-technical. There are technical things I've learned, like, you know, it's a very, very long list. You know, we may not have enough time to go over it, but in terms of professional growth, I think that's number one thing that I've learned, and I've basically applied in every other aspect of my life. Yeah.
Well, I think it sounds interesting that, you know, they have like all these three factors, you know, they consider to determine how much of an impact you're making in the company. Makes you to, you know, try to be versatile and, you know, committed to communicating better with your team and doing great work as an individual. As a tech lead at Microsoft, I mean, how do you like cope with, you know, leading your team? I mean, the people that work with you, and how do you manage to align those people with the company's objectives?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the approach with leading is, funny enough, I didn't actually even think I was leading until my manager and my PM just called out, oh yeah, you know, you're the lead. I'm like, oh, like, yeah, you've been doing it the past 3 weeks. Like, I didn't even know that's what I was doing, but essentially it was a void that needed to get filled, right? It was taking initiative, right? Is you're in that meeting and people are talking and there's a huge question that needs to be answered, or there's a step that needs to happen, but no one wants to take it. It's essentially just coming in and saying, okay, what do we know? What do we not know? What do we need to do? And how do we get there? And then just saying, okay, I'm going to do this. This person go do this. This person go do this. This person go do this. That's essentially how I found myself in that position. And how do I approach leading? It's basically essentially what I just said, right? Trying to figure out what we know, what we don't know. How do we bridge that gap? And what needs to happen, right? And once you figure all of that out, then it's then easier for you to delegate and say, okay, I'll do this. You go do this. The next person goes and does this. But at the end of the day, it's all aligning to people's strength and what people want to do. So I have teammates, for example, who may be really good at UI stuff, but they want to learn backend. And I know, okay, next time there's like a task for this, I can try to suggest that this person takes it. Or if we're like in a crunch time, for example, and something needs to get fixed yesterday, I know who to say, okay, I'll do it, or this person has a better chance of finishing this in, you know, a very short amount of time. So yeah, that's essentially how I try to lead. I also try to pay attention to like the general feel, right? Like the general, okay, how is this person feeling about this? How is this person feeling about this? Like asking for feedback. Whenever I'm like, all right, I think we should do this way. What do you guys think? You know, like always ask for feedback. Or, hey, why do you think we shouldn't do it this way, right? Or how would you do it? Essentially giving people the opportunity to contribute and to basically feel like they're part of a team, because otherwise there are people who would just sit back and not talk during the whole meeting, and that's completely fine. But you want to essentially enable them to do what you're doing in the future, or even be better than you, and that involves sometimes crafting the right questions or finding the right situations for them to come out, and, you know, align it with team goals and companies. Everything I do, I try to think about the impact. I try to think about the value it's creating. All right. It's really simple to do because I have a really good manager and product owner. So before I even start doing something, I kind of know, all right, this is the value this will bring out. And I continually have conversations with my PM and my manager, and like, all right, hey, the next 3 weeks, we're going to focus our energy on this. We're going to try to do this because this will enable X, Y, and Z, right? And then my manager will be like, okay, now for the next 3 weeks, he knows what I'm working on. And if at any point in time that needs to change, I'll be like, hey, we're going to decommit some resources from here and put it in this place because of X, Y, and Z. Same thing with my PO. She's great, right? She's always like, all right, hey, we need to do this to enable that. And then from there, during sprint planning, we can then kind of slot in when specific tasks should be done based on their impact, right? She's the one communicating with the customer. So she knows, all right, this is a bigger headache or pain than this. So maybe we should move this as a lower priority and this gets higher priority. So again, just boils down to constant communication and understanding what you're building, but also listening to your customers and your product owner, essentially.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you've worked on projects that increased efficiency and reduced costs. Like, how do you manage to figure these things out and, make decisions that is impacting your company in those areas?
So most of the situations that I find myself in where I've been able to, increase efficiency by a very, very big amount, or like reduce cost, or, reduce time for a process. Say maybe something was taking 4 hours, reduce it to like minutes. Is the first thing I try to do in situations like that is understand the system, understand the code base, understand, it may take me a week, it may take me 3 weeks, but understand the process, understand how something is happening, understand why it's happening, understand, basically just step back and just read it like you're reading a book. Then make diagrams, right? Understand what's currently happening. Go talk to the owners of the product. Go talk to the people who use it, right? See the tech stack. See how everything is working. Then from there, step back. See this whole picture, right? From once you understand it and you understand pain points and you understand everything, then you can then try to not rewrite, but say, okay, why is this here? You can then start asking the why. Why is this here? What is this thing doing? We have 4 of the exact same thing, right? Or this process is repeated multiple times. Why? Right? And then from there, you can then, sometimes the answer to that why is a very, very valid answer. Then you say, okay, that makes sense, right? But other times it's just, someone just got lazy and didn't remove it. Or, why do we have 9 Azure resources for one simple thing? Like these resources are just taking up money. And then you realize, it's, that thing hasn't been deployed to you since the day it was created. And then it's just, you're sucking up money. So the main things there is just understanding. You can't fix something if you don't understand it. And understanding is typically the hardest part, because it requires, it's like you're just so uncomfortable, right? You're just like, man, I don't know. Nah. Like that's the part where the most learning happens. And so just understand it, then you start asking why. And then after you ask why, you get answers. Then you can then rebuild, ask for feedback, say, hey, this is the way it's working today, this is the way it can be working, and this way will reduce X, will increase Y, will increase this, we'll do that. And then once you get feedback, take it to people who know more than you, and then have them compare both of them, and you explain to them, and then they're like, and then from there, you then go on to do all those things. So it's just it's a matter of making yourself uncomfortable, right? Like just being comfortable with being uncomfortable, essentially.
Yeah. Sounds like a great idea. I mean, just like you mentioned, like you need to really understand what you're trying to fix, like, spending good time to understand what you're working on and then think about ways you could improve it. It seems obviously most of what you do is like mentoring like junior engineers or developers. Like, how do you approach this mentorship? Like, how do you mentor junior team members, and how do you feel it has been impacting their careers?
So a lot of what I do is, so first I try to know the person. I try to, again, on this, like have in-depth conversations with them to try to understand how they got into programming or whatever career field you're doing, and what they want to get out of it, right? There was a time in my career where I didn't fully know where I was going, but I knew I wanted to be like that guy or that guy. And then I went to go talk to that guy. I'm like, hey, I want to be like you. And so from there, again, they did something very similar to me. So it's first understanding how they go to what they're doing and then where they want to go to. And then from there, just basically identifying gaps between where they are and their ideal position. Sometimes it could be, yeah, okay, I get this one you want to do. You don't seem to have the technical skill for it right now. So let's identify opportunities for you to bridge that gap. And that means either going to scout projects that will put you in that situation, or if a project comes along and I'm like, oh yeah, this will be great for you because it has all the tech stack that you need to learn to get to that position, right? That's the first one. The second one is just communication, for example. Like, I know I've had people who are some of the brilliant programming minds I've seen. Like, we're talking even like I'm learning from them, from the way they code, and I've been doing it more than them. Like, they do it by book, textbook, right? Read documentation, do everything properly. Like, they write code that could last 5 years, like that could last a long lifetime. In that, if you want to change something, it's easily changeable and all that things. But they have a hard time communicating, right? They have a hard time conveying an idea. For example, right? They may be talking for 5 minutes, but they haven't said anything. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like, yeah. So in situations like that, it's okay. You're clearly one of the brightest minds here, but you're having a hard time portraying that. You're having a hard time portraying your ideas. And with those people, it's then trying to figure out, okay, when we're in specific meetings where we're talking, give them opportunity to speak, but also trying to teach them this person doesn't need to know this information, so no need to talk about it, right? When your audience dictates what you say. With a manager, he may not want to know why one variable is not working. He wants to know this system isn't working, we're working on fixing it. With your project owner, they may want to know the underlying root cause without why that thing is not working. Then you go in depth, right? If you're speaking to a whole group of people like an organization, right? They definitely want to know very high level and the impact from there. So with those people is basically just teaching them or trying to help them understand what specific audience wants to hear from them and how to leverage and basically how to convey those ideas to those audiences. So yeah, that's essentially how I do it, right? It's meeting people, hearing why they're doing what they're doing, and then trying to fill the gap between what they know and what they don't know, and figuring out where they want to go and helping them get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge role you're playing there, more of like a leadership role, right?
Yeah, it is, but it's interesting. I definitely find it interesting because I as much as I mentor people, I also learn a lot from them, right? Like, as I said, there's so many things, so many stacks, so many projects I've worked on that I've learned so much from people where I'm like, oh damn, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way, but that way is the right way. The way I would have done it is definitely not the best way. Your way is the best way. So yeah, it's a give take relationship. It's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about your work with the Candoor project, like what you've been trying to achieve there?
Kandor is basically a company that me and a few other people founded. Essentially, it's a platform where people from underrepresented backgrounds can hop on and have phone calls with people in their dream jobs, in their dream roles. So if you want to be a software engineer and you're wondering what a software engineer does, what a software engineer at Google does, our goal is that you can hop on and find a software engineer who works at Google and book a phone call with them for free, right? And essentially a way to get mentored, essentially building a network of people who want to help you, right? Unlike LinkedIn, where you can find those people, on LinkedIn, they're not there to help. Well, some are there to help, but if you send a message, they're less likely to respond. On Kandor, all the advisors that we have from all these companies are there and they want to help. The main reason for them signing up to Kandor is to help people, essentially. So that's essentially what Kandor is. As of right now, we are basically we built we've built our advisor and advisee base to a very good number, and we have meetings happening every day from people booking those calls. And in the future, we are hoping to kind of add more features where instead of just meeting with one person and then meeting multiple people, you can kind of have someone who you can kind of set goals essentially to say, okay, I want to do this, and then that person can kind of like follow you along the way, helping you achieve those goals, checking in, essentially a mentorship platform, right? It's something that we're thinking of. But for now, it's just a platform where like, hey, I have an interview with Google on Friday. I want to talk to an engineer who worked at Google to try to get some tips, right? So it's essentially your person on the inside. On there, you book a call with them and you have that conversation with them and you kind of get inside tips, right? So essentially bridging the network gap, because right now the reality is it's about who you know. 9 out of 10
sure.
It's who you know, not necessarily what you know. And so not all networks are created equal. For people from underrepresented backgrounds, they have a hard time doing those things. So we're essentially just trying to bridge the network gap.
Nice. Well, how do you manage to cope your responsibility at Microsoft with that of Kandor? Like, how has it been for you?
Initially, it was challenging because, it felt like it was basically two full-time roles, where at Candoor, I started off writing the code, but I eventually moved to a leadership position where we hired a team to write the code and I just oversaw them. So, going through PRs, made sure that they had, proper coding practice, proper test, make sure that you were using Git properly, proper software development etiquettes, essentially. And so, it took some time to transition to that role, mainly because at the beginning, we started Kandor in like 2021. And in the beginning, it was hard because I love coding, man. Like, I love writing the code. I love understanding what happens, knowing what happens when you click one button and the data goes here and it goes here, and like all the architecture and stuff. So I love being in the thread itself. So it took a while for me to then realize and say, okay, I can't do this. I can't do both. Otherwise, I'm going to burn out. So eventually I transitioned to the role that I mentioned, and then at Microsoft, I write code. So it's all about just making time for what's important to you. The both of them are very, very important to me. I think I balance it pretty well. Again, having your priority list, like knowing what you're going to do, knowing what's important, what's not important, what's urgent, right? Having those 4 quadrants, and then from there trying to figure out, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. So it starts off hard, but you eventually learn to balance everything.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, with the fast changing world of technology, like things keep coming up. Like as a software engineer, you have a lot of stuff to learn, to keep up with the latest trends. Like, how do you get to learn new stuffs and use them in your work? Like, and I mean, how do you get to prioritize things that you need to learn, things that you feel some of the most important trends right now in the tech industry that could, improve your work and, just pick them up?
I have a very interesting approach to that. I don't try to keep up with trends, because trends will keep coming. They'll keep coming. They'll keep coming. They'll keep coming. They'll keep coming.
Yeah.
And before you figure out, oh, there's a new one that's out, man. And if you're not using this one, you're lacking. Oh, let me try to pick it up. Nah, man, that one was yesterday, man. You know what I mean? Like, it just keeps coming and coming. And I'm just like, yo, I haven't even learned the one that I said I was gonna learn properly, right? Before you I have like 9 unfinished projects where I just keep jumping on the newest thing because that's the newest, that's the latest thing. Like, nah, I try not to keep up with them, for lack of a better word to explain. What I do is, whenever I'm working on a project, whenever I'm like, okay, I want to work on this, or, oh, this sounds interesting, I want to do this, right? I let the project dictate what I use and what I learn. So if I'm building a new app, for example, and there's a new framework, word on the street is this framework is really good, then I try to build the app using that framework. I don't go out of my way to learn that framework, because why? Like, there's so many things, and if this thing is working for you now, like, I don't see a need to go to throw away what you already know, right? To throw away this just to go focus on that thing because it's the newest thing.
Yeah.
You can go focus on that thing if it's solving a problem you have. If there's a shortcoming from what you currently know, right? Or if it's the new norm, if it's the new standard, right? Then yes, go learn it. But just because it's the newest shiny thing, that's not a reason for you to go to drop what you already know. It's especially if that new shiny thing isn't fixing a problem you have. A lot of these things are just fads, right? The latest this, the latest no. If you're working on a new project and you have a problem, or you want to learn, okay, here, I've heard about Next.js, for example. I want to go learn Next.js. All right. Next time I'm working on a simple UI project, rather than using a framework I already know, let me try using it in Next.js. That's completely valid. But I'm not about to go throw everything that I already know just to pick up Next.js because it's the next big thing, right? Because it's being hyped, right? That's my viewpoint. Otherwise, you'll go crazy, man, right? Things keep evolving and evolving and evolving. And I have, the way I think about it is your knowledge of stacks and frameworks at any point in time should be the one that you need to complete the job or the project you're working on right now. When you move to a new project, you pick up the new framework that's best for that project, right? Your intelligence is not your ability to know all of these things. It's your ability to learn. And when time comes for you to pick up that new framework, then you go pick it up and learn it. Otherwise, there's no need to change. Oh, blah blah blah. Look at that. No. That's doing too much. That's how you get overwhelmed. That's how you get anxious. There are some other trends and stacks and frameworks that are very easy to integrate into what you already know, like the whole AI thing with like GitHub Copilot, for example. It's super easy to just add a VS Code extension, and it integrates into your workflow. That's very easy for you to add and start using. Now, rewriting your entire code base in Vue.js because Vue is the next. Why? Right? Unless it's fixing a problem you have, it's futile, right? There's no need for you to go do all of that. When you're working on the next project, yes, pick it up, right? If Vue is something you want to learn, pick it up. If Next is something you want to learn, pick it up on the next project, or see how you can integrate it. But don't drop everything you're doing just to go learn that one thing because everyone says is the best thing. So that's how I personally keep up. Like, next time I'm working on mobile apps, for example, and I heard, this thing, I actually made a video about Flask, web server, like the API thing, and someone commented, try using this instead. It's similar to Flask and is way more interesting. Next time I'm working on something that involves an API, then I'll go use it. But I'm not about to go drop all my Flask projects, you know what I mean, just to start. No. The next time, then I use it. That's the way I personally keep up. Yeah.
Nice, cool. Like, what advice will you give to someone who is interested in working for Microsoft? Like, someone who aspires to work for a company like Microsoft?
Microsoft is very unique in that they care about your technical ability, but they care more about cultural fit.
Okay.
I think. Don't quote me on this. This is what I feel. This is my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
Because my technical interview wasn't the best, I'll be honest, right? Rather, my technical screen. They gave me a question. I remember it was something where the solution was using 2 cubes. I didn't know how to do it. But I sat down and they saw something on my resume. They saw that I was mentoring. I was building a mobile app with a freshman at the time, and I was a senior in college. And we're just working on a mobile app together. Not just that, we had worked on a few other projects together. And the first 5 minutes of a 15-minute interview was the technical thing that I was just stuck on. I didn't know how to do. Then the remaining 10 minutes, they spent talking to me about just that mentorship experience between me and him. And they were like, why are you doing it? And I was like, well, I like coding. I like mobile apps. He wanted to learn about mobile apps. Why not? or we're working on this project where I do half, he does half, and we bring it together and we learn from each other. And he's a freshman and he like that stuff. And I genuinely believe that's what propelled me to the next round. Now, the next round and the technical interviews, I prepared and I aced all of that stuff, but I believe that's what set me apart from all the other people who may have aced the interview. Microsoft has a mission, which is to empower every person and organization in the world to achieve more, right? So they care a lot about cultural fit. So for aspiring developers, the technical part is important, absolutely, but nobody wants to work with somebody who they don't like, right? They want to work with good people, essentially. So figuring out a way to grow as a person too, as an individual, or showcase parts of you as an individual that shows that you're a decent person, you're good to work with, you care about people. Not just for Microsoft, this is every other big company as well. I think that's what will set you apart. Otherwise, just the technical part is also important. You want to show technical competences, and the best way to do that is to work on projects. Not just start with small projects, but start working on increasingly harder projects, right?
Yeah.
Increase the difficulty of the projects to the point where you end up working or doing projects that are very similar to what the engineers are doing. I remember when I was doing technical interviews with companies, they would ask me, "Oh, tell me about this project," and I would say, "Oh, I'm using this and pipelines and stuff," and they're like, "Oh, we're using pipelines," and then we just end up chatting for 15 minutes about a problem I was having, and then they tell me how to solve it, and then I was like, "Oh, have you thought about," you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, we're just talking about the work that they're doing, right? Because my technical level was at their level already, so it made it super, super easy for them to hire me, right? Because I was working on projects or explaining scenarios that they've been through or they're seeing at work. So the on-ramping time, the build-up time will be way less. So I think that's the best tip that I'll give. Otherwise, just be yourself, fall in love with the process, enjoy it. I love it. If I wasn't getting paid, I'll still be doing it. So it's super easy for me to find this project, work on this project and do things. But I understand for people, it's difficult. And I'm not saying it's easy for me. It's difficult, but I embrace that difficulty. I find peace in it, right? Man, I don't know what to do. All right, I'm going to go read lines and lines of documentation to try to figure it out. I'm going to go find articles, Medium articles, Stack Overflow, posts and stuff like that. So I embrace the difficulty, and I think anyone who embraces it, that mindset will set you apart from others, and you'll just keep growing and growing.
Well, I'm just curious. This is a question, a thought that came to my mind while you were talking. I was going to ask you, how do you get to figure out the next project you want to work on, a side project? How do you get to figure them out?
When I was in college, and when I was first starting, I attached learning outcomes to projects. So I started off building a website, right? Because we use websites all the time, right? I want to know how this website works, right? How does someone go to, Umabu website? I want to know how that works. So I built a website. And from there, I then said, okay, what's next? Websites are different from web apps. Let me try to build a web application, one that stores data and does all that stuff. Then I said, that's interesting. Then I learned that. Then I moved to web applications that stored and fetched data, that collects data from a user and stores it in a database, right? CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. After I learned those ones, and I'm like, all right, I know how to do this one. Then I realized that, all right, all these little projects that I was working on were good, but I needed one that had a bigger impact. I needed one that did something. And so luckily for me, I ended up getting a job as a web developer in an engineering department, civil engineering. And from there, I was like, oh man, okay, this work that I'm doing will be seen by thousands of people. How do I make sure, X, Y, and Z happens, right? So essentially that whole learning phase was me trying to figure out, how does this thing work, right? It led me to build mobile applications and deploy them on the App Store because I want to know how mobile apps work, right? I find it interesting. I find it intriguing. From there, it's sourcing opportunities for me to learn C++. I ended up working with a professor where I was modifying C++ scripts to basically detect mosquito noises in an audio file using fast Fourier transform and stuff like that, right? How did I find myself there? I wanted to learn, right? I was like, hey, I want to work with a lower level language, right? From there, I basically went and did it. And then since then, it's just been a variety of, okay, I created a project and videos about transferring music playlist from Spotify to Apple Music, right? So you want to transfer all your music from one platform to another. I want to work with the APIs. I want to know how the back end for Spotify works. What better way to know than to build a project that interacted with those things, right? Now, the ideas for the project themselves come from a mixture of problems that I see that I want to solve, right? Like the Spotify to Apple Music one, I genuinely was moving from Apple Music to Spotify. I wanted to transfer, so I was like, oh, why don't I build an app to do that? And then I had another friend build the reverse. So from Apple Music to Spotify, I did Spotify to Apple Music, right? Or I think we did vice versa. So that was that whole project. And so it's just about trying to figure out, okay, I have this experience or I want to learn about this experience. I mean, the project I'm currently working on is a real-time voice translation app where I have one phone that's a transmitter and I'm speaking in English, but you're listening in your phone in a different language, French. Spanish, right? And that project came because my older brother was like, hey, in his church, he has a lot of people who don't speak English and they want to listen to the sermon as well. Can I build it? Hell yeah, I can build it. That will teach me web sockets, IO operations, audio files. These are all things that I haven't worked with. The last time I worked with WebSocket was just video, transmitting video. That's simple. But now we're transmitting audio and translating it into a different language using stuff. That stuff I don't know how to do, but I am super excited to work on it because I know I'll learn way more about it than just reading a documentation on, WebSockets or stuff like that. So that's how I find my projects, right? Real world scenarios where I can solve problems using code. I try to identify those things. That's the first half. The second half is just learning opportunities and learning outcomes. If I don't know enough about this, I'll go work on something very similar to it so I learn about it, essentially.
Nice. Like with the way, okay, just a quick one before I go to the last question for the podcast. Do you think it's a good idea, like spending like good amount of time watching courses to learn technology that you would most likely use in your career, or you would rather just like head dive into it and just figure your head around it through projects?
It's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of both. I strongly believe there's value in courses for sure.
Yeah.
But there comes a time when you know enough about something where you don't need a course to learn it.
Yeah, sure.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Anybody who has worked with React, I don't think you need a course on Vue to learn Vue. I think you can go read the Vue documentation and understand what you need to do. Because the blueprint is the same. There's routing, there's states, there's components, there's the DOM, there's all those things, right?
Yeah.
Those things are the same across any web framework. So if you know those things, then if you want to learn those things for a separate language, you can just go read the documentation. But the thing is, a lot of people don't like to read, which is why they prefer watching videos, which is fine, right? So, but if you want to learn something completely brand new, that's very niche, like, like this whole AI ML wave, I would rather take a course on it than to read documentation personally, because it's like a data analysis thing, which I don't have any experience on, right? So I believe there's a mixture of both, but if there's a certain level where you know enough where you don't need a course, and the best way to learn is by working on projects. But courses are also important. If anything, I would follow a course where you're working on something together, or like a video, right, where code along, right? Or find your own use case. All right, this is my use case. Then watch a video that has their own use case and try to bridge the gap between two of them, right? Like if you want to figure out how to fetch data from a database
Yeah.
in like Java Spring Boot, for example, you can go watch a Java Spring Boot API where they fetch data and then just take that part and then apply it to your project, and then take this part, take that part, and then do anything, because that's what you'll be doing in the real world. That's what you'll be doing
Yeah,
in an
sure.
actual job, because nobody knows everything.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. So, wrapping up with the podcast, the last question I was going to ask is, I mean, with your experience in the tech industry, what are some of the trends that you feel are shaping the future of software engineering?
That's a very interesting question. I think I actually made a video about this yesterday.
Mm.
AI is changing it, but not in the way people think. A lot of people think, oh, AI can write code, now it can do it. To some extent, yeah, it can write code and it can solve your problems, but the code that it's writing is based on code that already exists. And there are, not a lot, but there are scenarios where we haven't written code to do specific things. You know what I mean? And in
Yeah,
that case, if you ask AI, it doesn't know it because it's not capable of critical thinking, reasoning, problem solving skills. It's not capable of those things. It's just garbage in, garbage out, right? Computer. It gets data, trains models, and then the models spit things out. So AI won't replace, programmers, not in the near future, I think. I think how AI is shaping the future of software engineering and software development is in the way products and apps are built. A lot of products, a lot of apps, a lot of software are integrating AI into their software. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like Zoom, for example, Zoom and a bunch of other video platforms, right? They have this AI thing now that basically summarizes the key talking points of everything we've just spoken and just sends it to you. Microsoft has Copilot, not just GitHub Copilot, but Copilot for Word documents, PowerPoints that basically give you a place to start. You can describe what you want and it starts creating the PowerPoint decks and slides and all those things. What else? Adobe, right? The
yeah,
design company for Premiere Pro, Photoshop, all those things. They started with just generative AI, where you circle something and type something and it automatically generated. That wasn't there prior. That wasn't there in like 2020, 2019. It wasn't there. Figma, Canva, Slack, Grammarly, all these companies, right? They're integrating AI in some way or some form. They're not changing their core product. You know what I mean? Zoom is still
yeah,
video that we're doing now, right?
yeah,
Microsoft still makes Microsoft Word and all those things. They're just integrating AI in a way that enhances user experience, right? That makes it easy for people to start to do something. So imagine for example, this whole, all our talking points could have been generated if you just carried like my PDF, like a PDF of my resume, and says, hey, I'm having a podcast with this person. Give me questions that I can ask them. And it can just generate all that stuff. The questions may not be accurate, but it's a starting point. It's done 50%
yeah,
of the work for you. You don't have to go through and analyze all those things, right? So I think AI is influencing programming in the way software is built. A lot of companies are integrating these tools and learning how. It's still fairly new. The companies that are doing it and doing it well are the ones that have billions of dollars in budgets to basically do experiments and hire the smartest, AI engineers and stuff like that. But it's still fairly new, right? And there isn't a lot of technical documentation on how to do it. But as more documentation comes out, having one or two projects, right, where you've been like, okay, I have this little project, and this is the way I integrated AI in a way to make or to enhance the user experience, right? It's a pattern that we'll continue to see, because if you're not using it, then you're kind of like leaving a lot on the table, right? I've written, I think, which app do I use? I use ChatGPT a lot, but I also use, I'm trying to remember. There's a specific one that I use a lot, and I use the AI feature in it so much that it just saves me so much time. You know what I mean? And I'm specifically using that one mainly because of that feature, right? So, all right, in the future, I don't think AI will replace, but I think learning how to integrate AI and any AI features into products, either it's generation, either it's, feel either it's like analysis is definitely a great skill to have. And I think it'll set people apart. It'll set developers from, people who don't move on with the trends. Now that's a trend that I can be like, all right, in one of my existing projects, I can go figure out how to add AI to it, right? Because it's a trend that I'm seeing. Yeah, essentially.
Wow. So you feel like every engineer who wants to like stand out in their career should definitely adopt some AI integration skills.
Learn it. It's a trend, and I don't think it's going to go away with the investment. Like the AI models are getting better and better and better and better and better and better. And so if there's a use case where AI can make something simple, right? Why not adopt it? You know what I mean? Adopt it, add it to your product. Like Typeform, the popular form company, it does it in a very, very simple way where, say I'm creating a form for people to fill. I ask the first question, then I put the first answer, right? For someone to like select. There's there's an AI button there where when you click on it, it basically just generates and very similar responses based on your first question and the next one. It makes creating that question like 10 times easier because it gives you a starting point. You know what I mean? And that's the hardest part for most people, right? Figuring out a way to start, right? So, if you're building apps, if you're building software, learn it. It's a skill that will definitely be valuable because there's so many ways AI can reduce the drudgery, right? The mental lift, like all right, I need to write this paper, or I need to do this thing, or I need to do this thing, right? Like, where do I even start, right? If you can click on one button and it does it for you, why not? Like, I think in VS Code, GitHub Copilot now has GitHub Copilot chats where it can create commit messages based on the files you've changed. With one click. We all know that, all right, I'm coding, I'm about to add a commit message, work in progress, or you add something that's like, you could definitely be a lot more descriptive. You can click one button and it just generates everything for you. It's a great starting point and it'll give you ideas to even add more. So why not? It's a trend that I don't see going away anytime soon, personally.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for all the insights you've shared. I believe a lot of our viewers will learn a lot from some of the thoughts you've shared. I don't know if you have any maybe advice or anything you want to throw up as we wrap up.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate. Look forward to seeing how this turns out. And like I said, I believe a lot of people will learn a lot from the insights you shared. And thanks for your time. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. Bye. Yeah, bye.
And that concludes the end of another episode of the Dixa podcast. I hope you've learned a lot. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comment section, like the video, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next episode.